Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are really excited to be here with you in our next Lessons in Leadership series. My name is Allison Weiss, and I'm the Associate Director of Corporate and Executive Education at the Brown School of Professional Studies. The mission of the Brown School of Professional Studies is to empower you with the skills, resources, and networks that you need to transform the way the world works for good. And we are so passionate about this because recent employee engagement surveys are showing really alarming trends. According to a Gallup survey that was taken in just November 2023, so quite recently, 70% of US workers report being not engaged at work. And that has huge implications for productivity and innovation, but also for mental and emotional well-being, because we spend over 50% of our working lives at work. Most of us do, at least. And so if we are unhappy and disengaged at work, that's going to have huge impacts on our mental and emotional well-being, as well as the output we are creating. In addition, 44% of global and 52% of US employees are reporting a huge amount of stress, saying that they even felt a large amount of stress that previous day. And this is a really impactful quote. It says, "Employee stress has been rising for over a decade. Gallup finds that managers play an outsized role in the stress workers feel on the job, which influences their daily stress overall." And so to me, there's two really important findings from these reports. Finding number one is that the way the world works now is not, in fact, working for everyone or even most people. And we need to transform the way the world works for good. And the second insight that I see from this, I know that it initially seems depressing or disheartening to see that managers have an outsized influence in the amount of stress that workers are feeling. But actually, what I want all of you to feel is that by showing up today, you are empowering yourself to be that positive impact, because you play an outsized role in the stress that your direct reports feel. But you can do that in a positive way. So we are so grateful that you're here, that you're learning, and we're so grateful that you've chosen the School of Professional Studies as your partner in your learning journey for today. And we hope you'll choose us in the coming months and years as you continue your career trajectory. And so I want to talk really briefly about the ways that we are here to be your career and lifelong partners in your leadership and professional journeys. And then I'll be really happy to turn things over to Ed, and he will lead us through today's incredible lessons in leadership session. So we offer different packages and different learning journeys depending on what you are looking for. The first category that we offer is professional and early career masters. So if you are looking to do a deep dive and earn a master's level credential, we have 33 different programs that are a mix of online, in-person, and hybrid options to allow you to gain that mastery. In addition, we have over 30 non-credit programs that are short programs and certificate programs in various topics, and I'll talk a little bit more about them on the next slide. That can be as short as a couple of days, as long as about 6 months, to help you learn an in-demand skill quickly without enrolling in a full program. And then lastly, we have different programs for organization. So if you're an organizational leader and you're looking for an opportunity for us to come in or for you to come to us onto campus and learn leadership skills or technical skills, we're also available to customize a program that meets your needs. And what makes Brown stand out from the other offerings is that all of our offerings are research-backed, so they are proven to be effective and to be in demand. And we only create content around the topics that we see as trending in workforce trends, so the most in-demand topics. We offer programming for people at all stages in their career, starting at early career, mid-career, all the way to senior level leaders. We offer flexible delivery formats that work in your busy time. So anything from an online versus an in-person modality, a short program, or even these one-off short webinars. And we offer them in three primary categories. So you'll see in the graphic on the right, the three categories that we focus on are health, leadership, and data and technology. In particular, I want to draw your attention to a couple programs that are open for your enrollment right now, if you'd be interested in joining us. We have availability for our Applied Diversity, Equity, and Inclusions Strategies Certificate, which is an all-online 6-week course where you learn DEI skills to be a more inclusive leader. We have openings in our Leader as Coach program, which we offer as both an online or an in-person course, depending on how you'd like to take it. We have openings in our Effective Communication program and our Executive program in General Management, which is a 3-course leadership certificate. On the data and technology side, our Applied AI and Data Science program, which is a more technical program, is recruiting now. And AI Ethics and Governance, which is more of a leadership and technology program, will be recruiting shortly. And lastly, in the health side, our mindfulness portfolio offers sessions quarterly, and we have openings for that now as well. And the last thing I want to say on this slide before I introduce and turn things over to Ed is that you have the opportunity to influence the future of our programming. So at the end of today's webinar, before we get into your questions, we are going to ask you a couple of questions to help us influence the future of our portfolio. And I also want to make a note that I will be monitoring the Q&A throughout. So if you have a question for Ed at any time, please click on the bottom bar of Zoom, click on Q&A, and type and submit your questions there. I'll be looking at that throughout today's webinar, and we will share a recording of this session in about 48 hours. So with that, I am delighted to hand things over to one of my favorite people to learn from, Ed Barrows. He is a professor of the practice and leadership at the Brown School of Professional Studies. He's an International Coaching Federation certified coach and a member of Harvard's Institute of Coaching. Prior to joining Brown, he worked as managing director at Duke Corporate Education, where he was responsible for designing and delivering programs for a portfolio of global clients. And prior to that, he worked in a variety of professional services positions with Deloitte, General Electric, PwC, and the Palladium Group. So I think what makes Ed really stand out to me and what I always feel like I learned so much from him is that he has both the academic background to be an incredible teacher and also the industry experience to know what actually matters. And that is what makes, I think, you such a special teacher, Ed. So with that, I will turn things over to you and to welcome you. Thank you for being with us today.
You, Allison. Hello, everybody. Good to see you. For folks that are new to our Let's Talk Core Leadership, hello. For the folks who are coming back, it's good to see you again. Thank you, Allison, for that introduction, per usual. I appreciate that. So what we want to do today, everybody, is extend, and I'll go through quite a bit of content and talk about team building and really focus on reinvigorating team building. That word is chosen for a reason. Most of us, I think I put in a post on LinkedIn yesterday in preparation for this. I asked the question, how many people here are on a team? I asked that sort of rhetorically and humorously because I think virtually everybody is on a team. At least that's been my experience. And interestingly enough, I was just teaching teaming yesterday to our Master of Technology leadership students who are here. So it's timely. We did an interesting simulation I'll talk a little bit about, but I'll run through very quickly lessons in leadership, what this is about, 12 skills. I'll give you a refresher. And I'd like to wish my co-author, Laura Downey, who's on this call, happy anniversary. It is our anniversary of the book being out 1 year, so we're delighted to be celebrating that. I think we both forgot, but the publisher reminded us, so that was nice. We'll delve into team building, which is why you're here, and give you some action steps to think about. So if you've been following the conversation that Allison talked about, you note that we have many different types of lessons in leadership. This is but one of them. Let's talk core leadership skills. But check back on our website regularly. We have all kinds of content that comes out that you can take advantage of, both written and video, as well as live sessions like this. I will make a plug, though. If you have been coming to these and like the content around 12 skills, Allison mentioned very quickly, we are putting together an executive, what is it? Executive, I think, program.
Executive program and general management.
General management. That's right. Thank you, Allison. Which actually incorporates this content into 3 courses from which you can get a certificate from Brown. So if you like this content, you'll find myself and even expanded content in there that you may find interesting. So if you haven't seen the 12 skills model before, this is it. We have spoken every month on one of the topics. In July, we're over halfway through. We're in the second half of the year on team building. And you can see it's organized around the 6 areas. And within each of those areas are the individual skills. And the genesis is, having watched leaders and developed leaders for many years as part of executive programs, my colleague Laura and I found that there were common things, I'd say about 70 to 80%, of continued requests across programs of leader skills. And that was the idea behind really giving people who maybe didn't get an opportunity or want to enhance their skills in these areas a chance to think about that. You can go to the website, 12skills.com. There's a workbook there you can download for free for all the webinars we've done today. And the one on team building is up there as well, if you're so inclined. So why teams? Why teamwork, team building? You might think that, yeah, sure, it's important, but everybody's on a team. We've been on teams for a long time. Let me put it into perspective. Certainly, in talking with the master's students that we have here yesterday, and some of the work I'm doing with teams, just to help executive teams be more effective. There's a lot of change that's happening. We talk about this every month. Competition is enhancing. We need to have people across our organizations who have different perspectives, who are literally on the front lines and within the organization, to talk about the impact of that change. Teams enhance everyone's skills. So as technology changes, we want to make sure that we're building one another's skills in areas that maybe we don't have. Teams tend to generate, if they're high-performing teams, a sense of loyalty to not only the team, but the organization. Everyone's performance gets better from teams at the individual level. And then we want to build a culture that's really not just team-based, but it's focused on adaptability and agility. And oftentimes we execute that in the structure of a team. So that's why we're talking about teams. So some, I would say, popular types of books that I threw in here. This is by no means an exhaustive list, quite honestly, but some of the things that I found have been useful over the years is Richard Hackman's work on leading teams, Katzenbach and Smith's work, Wisdom of Teams. It's not new by any stretch. If you haven't heard of it, it's probably because it's been around for a while. And I have a couple of slides pulled out from there. Pat Lencioni's work, I just used the survey recently with a team. It's still very valid. I think it's over the 20-year anniversary for the 5 dysfunctions. Amy Edmondson's work on teaming, and then an interesting piece from a Brown graduate, actually, Claire Hughes Johnson. This is actually a huge book, and there's about 130 pages with tips and tools from her experience as an executive. I think it's Stripe and Google, of building and scaling organizations, some more contemporary snapshot from Silicon Valley. But again, I think these are very useful tools, and you may have others, and feel free to put those in the chat if you have particular topics or team books or references you like, so everyone can see those. But just moving on, so there's a lot of information out there, but what we want to cover off on today are a few things. First off, we want to talk about what makes a team successful. What are some of the fundamental configuration considerations when we're building a team we want to keep in mind? And I think the reason we're reinvigorating is we oftentimes forget some of these things, but they come back to bite us if we're not careful. How do we launch and develop a team? And what does a structured teaming process look like? We'll cover on some of the older topics, but we'll bring it up to date and some newer thinking. What are your responsibilities if you're a team leader? What are some of the things you should be doing? Oftentimes we suffer from what I would call, or is called, plunging in bias. We just jump onto the team and start working. We don't necessarily pay very much attention to process. And I'm laughing because we did a simulation yesterday on teaming, the Mount Everest simulation from Harvard Business Publishing. And I told everyone, we had 10 different teams working on it. Laura was actually here. And I said, you really need to make sure you pay attention to team process. And what we found at the end was a couple of teams that did pay more attention to how their team would plan and function and share information together ended up being more successful. So it was interesting. But to that end, we'll talk about some of the dysfunctions that we see on teams as well. So contrast this with your own experience. Let's take a quick snapshot and ask people, again, if you've done this before, if you've been here before, you're familiar with how we do this. This is the assessment that comes right out of the 12 skills book, but go ahead and just put in the chat, which I have in front of me, what's your rating for each of these? If you were to rate yourself from a 0 to 3, think about a team that you're on, or if you're a team leader in particular, do you ensure that you have the right mix of people, to what degree? Do you have clear guidelines on what your team's purpose is and what the goals and deliverables are? And do you have an environment? Have you created a safe space where the team can flourish, develop relationships, and perform? I'd be interested on that scale of 0 to 9 to see in the chat how people are doing. Again, we try to create a safe space so you can share what you're thinking about the team. 6, 7. Okay, thanks, Ruth. Yep, great. 6, pretty common score. 6. All right, yeah, let's see some of those 7s. I'm not surprised by this. I'm sure there's a few that are higher, and I'm sure there's a few that are lower, and I'm sure that this varies by the teams you've been on. So yeah, this is nice. This is helpful. I'm interested in if you want to also put in the chat, which of the three areas, sort of the first, second, or third, do you see you would need to work on for your team? If there was one area of these three different dimensions, which I'm going to get into here more in a moment, you need to work on. Be good to know what those are. So at any point in the discussion today, feel free to, thanks, Jason, put that in the chat. I think it's good for other people to get a sort of sense of, oh, how do I fare relative to other organizations? It's interesting. The first area is coming up a lot. It's really kind of setting, and I think that's why we call this reinvigorating, is you really want to think about getting your team process off on the right foot. You can fix it or you can improve it, but it's a little bit harder once some of those norms are established. This is interesting findings, just anecdotally from people on the call. So we know what a team is. We always want to start off with some type of definition. I'm sure you have other definitions, and this is the one we're going to use today for purposes of teaming. It's really an established, we're going to refer to it as sort of a fixed, intact group of people really cooperating together to achieve a common goal, right? That's, you can have slight variation on that, but people working together to achieve a common goal. The challenge that we face on teams are many, many, many areas. And again, I keep putting this stuff in the chat. I really appreciate it because other people will see this too. We do so much teaming today, in person, virtual, hybrid, however you term the teamwork that we do. But a few things to keep in mind: not every project you work on needs to be worked on by a team. I think that's an important thing to think about right at the outset. If we have an inclination to set up a team to do work, we might want to ask ourselves, do we really need a team before we try to go through the teaming process? When you do need a team to accomplish the work, given the nature of mixes of skills and the complexity of the task, you want to make sure, if you are a team leader, or even if you're on the team, you're taking time to invest in getting the team off on the right foot. Some of this stuff is really basic, what we'll call blocking and tackling. And working together, Thelma, is a challenge for a lot of different teams for many different reasons. But when you really need to put together an effective team, think about what it is you can do, even if you're not the team leader, to make sure that team's effective. Because once some of those norms are established, it becomes difficult to change. So let's take a minute and think about someone you've worked for over the course of your life, or even worked around. Work is probably the wrong term, been around. So it could be from a high school sports team or a college sports team or a community organization, or any type of social organization, or in a work setting. Someone that was a great team leader. That woman, she just had a knack for building strong teams, or you've observed someone who is good at building a team. The question, the coaching activity for you is, what did they do? Just give me one thing. So think about a team you've been on that was really effective. Maybe you led that team. Think about who the team leader was, and give me one thing, and your colleagues here on the call, one thing they did. They were empathetic. Okay. So what else did they want? Feedback from people on the team. Think about a team that really was a strong team, or someone has a reputation for that. Good communicator. Accountability, that's a challenge in a lot of team setting. Good questions, good listener, planning. So you'll see expectations. That's a great one. Diversity. We know that diverse teams are higher performing today than ever before, right? We don't have to think about it and hope that that's a good thing. We know that. So you see some of, I would say, more conventional or contemporary thinking around diversity and inclusion, which is important. But you also see some of the basics, such as having a clear set of goals and planning and the like. So that's an interesting one, Roberto, that team leaders are charismatic. I do wonder if effective teams are necessarily led by charismatic leaders. In some cases, they certainly are. In some cases, maybe there's some variance. But that's your observation and that's your experience. So I certainly take it as you have it. So interesting perspectives on what a good team looks like. Now, what I find when I ask people, when I do this in class, in a classroom setting, I usually will start the activity with saying, think of the best team you've ever been on. And there's usually not a lot, usually people don't have a ton of examples to draw from. And I say, what makes that team great? And they usually go through the same kinds of things: listening, communication, trust, accountability, focus on results, things of that nature. The idea here is that most people know what a good team looks like, feels like, but we don't always create that in practice. So the question then becomes why? And that's what we're going to address in a little more detail today. So this is from Katzenbach and Smith's book, The Wisdom of Teams. So there's this idea that not every team is an actual team or a high-performing team, and many of you know this without me mentioning it. And Katzenbach and Smith's research in The Wisdom of Teams found that in order to have a real bona fide team, there needs to be 5 elements. First off, size matters, and less is probably more. You don't want a ton of people on your team. You'll see on the next page, I think I put in the Barrows rule, your team should be completely fed by two pizzas. They should have complementary types of skills. They should have a common and clear purpose that they're working towards. They should have some level of commitment, not just to the team, but to the approach of how they're going to tackle the work. And then there has to be a sense of mutual accountability. So I'm going to give you another little coaching test here. You don't have to put this in the chat. This is for your own edification. Think about a team you're on currently. So we'll use this as a chance to do a diagnostic for some of your own activities. So think about a team you're on. Could be a team you're leading or a team you're participating in or a team you just adjourned, whatever the case is. Ask yourself, list your team. Does your team have a mix of complementary skills? It's binary, yes or no. Do you feel like your team has a clear, meaningful purpose that is agreed upon? Are there performance goals and expectations? Is there a commitment to how we work in terms of team process to get the work done? And is there a sense of mutual accountability? So that's for you to think about. And the reason that I wanted to position this at the outset of what we're discussing today is as we go through, you might want to pay more attention to one of the things that we talk about that pertains to that particular element of a real team. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to think a little bit about that. Now, let's jump into some of the basics of the model that we have from 12 skills called the 3D process. They're not intended to be particularly sophisticated. So if you're looking at that thinking that's pretty basic, that's the idea. Because we want to get people to focus on the basics. That was Laura and my intent when we created this. So you really want to think about three general sort of activities, or I won't call them phases necessarily, but things to attend to, dimensions of performance. First off is you want to design the team properly. You want to get the right people on the team, the right mix of skills and capabilities, even personalities, to do the work well. And I think it's Jim Collins, if any of you are fans of Good to Great, getting the right people on the bus. Like that's what design has to do. That has to do with. The next thing you want to think about is presuming you've got that in place. And this is depicted linearly, but you can use it as an assessment device at any point in time. So for instance, if you haven't designed the team optimally, you can go back and make changes or adaptations. But your team should have a clear sense of direction once you have the requisite skills and capabilities together. And the leader's job and the team's job as well is to steer and guide the team toward the common goal or purpose of the team and the results orientation, the things we need to accomplish, whatever the purpose is for that team. So the team needs to have clear direction in order to perform. And oftentimes we, assign that, so to speak, to the leader, but everyone takes a role and has a part in that. And then probably more of an ongoing activity is management of team dynamics. And this is where I think going back to some of the points in the chat, some of the teams that you're on probably struggled. If you get off on the wrong foot and the dynamics get established that are not particularly beneficial or constructive, you can have real challenges managing your team's effectiveness. And you might not get to the point where we actually have a team on your hands. It may still be an underperforming team or working group, but it's far from being high performing. And that has to do with building relationships, creating that safe space, and diffusing conflicts. Now, there's been work done at Google on the elements of a team and creating safe spaces around psychological safety, ostentatious listening, and turn taking. I saw those in the chat. Those are still relevant. Those are more recent pieces of research. But I also want to give you a broader point of view as well when you think about your own teams. So here's a construct you can look at. Again, these are tools that you can use, reference points. I want to be clear they're not the answer. But Belbin has had, you can Google this, you'll find these team roles, and there's a variety of team roles that they advocate for on effective teams. This work is a little bit dated. However, I still think it's useful. Useful in the sense of getting you as a team leader or someone on a team to ask yourself, what are the roles that people are playing? Now, they don't have to be entirely distinct. These are behavioral characteristics. Someone can play multiple roles. But the question is, do you have people with different skills and capabilities on the team that will guide the team and drive it effectively? Do you have someone that is a coordinator? Do you have someone that is a good team worker? Do you have someone that makes sure things get done, or someone that brings things, quote unquote, over the line, a completer or a finisher? So it's useful to take a step back. You can delve into these roles by just going to their website. We have no affiliation with them whatsoever, so I want to be clear on that. But it's something that you can use to, again, consider as you're evaluating your team composition. Do you have the requisite skills and capabilities? And really, you're asking yourself, in order to accomplish the work that the team needs to do, do I have the right skill set and capabilities on the team? And that it's a fundamental question, but oftentimes it's not one that team leaders will ask at the outset. So if you've ever been on a team where you realize you need a certain skill or skills or capabilities down the road, you'll go out and try to get that, but the team will underperform if it can perform at any level anyway until you get that. So be thinking up front, and you can assess your teams currently if you're on one. Do I have, or do I believe I have the right kinds of roles and skills on the team? It's very important. It's a foundational element to get your team off on the right level or to reconfigure it if need be. Now, this is one of those things that people look at and kind of groan, the team charter. Okay, yep, team charter, heard it before, nothing new about this. I'd agree, there's really nothing new about a team charter. You can Google team charter, you'll get many, many different examples, things you can download, not suggesting one's better than another. But why use a team charter? It goes back to setting the team up for success. What's the project? Who's the sponsor? What's the level of priority relationship to the goals? Time frame, all the kinds of particulars. These are just a snapshot of what you would use. I have seen many teams skip over this process. It's just documentation, doesn't really matter. Let me ask a question if you want to put it in the chat. Why bother do this? I mean, if teams are just sort of a feature of life in organizations today and everybody's on a team, why bother taking valuable work time away to go back or even start off by creating a charter? Is this different from a team vision? Good question, Michelle. I think this is a little more expanded. So I think purpose and vision would kind of get rolled together, but this has some of the particulars. Is this something that can be done beforehand? Absolutely, you can do it beforehand. And yes, you can indeed evolve and adapt it as you go. To Eva's point, clarity. Bill, I think one of the things I like about what you just put in the chat, Christian, is this idea of agreement. I would be willing to bet a team to drive towards goals. It makes thinking visible. That sounds like a minor point, but it's really, really important. In fact, I'll give you an illustration. I'm working with a team now, excellent people on the team. They have done some of these things, but we're primarily focusing on the area of what's called an operating agreement. How do we make decisions? How do we run a meeting? How do we ensure that there's follow-up and accountability? So there's no right answer as to what should go on a team charter. There are some standard aspects of it. But the idea is you want to gain as much agreement up front as you can and clarity with the people on the team of how, that's a process question, how your team is going to function. Because in the absence of that, the team will end up sort of defaulting to a set of behaviors that may not be productive in nature, and they become hard to change over time. They can be changed. But the idea is it's very much worthwhile taking the time to say, how will we meet? When will we meet? Who will make decisions? What's the nature of conflict or discussion? How will we communicate? This notion of an operating agreement, and then it's an agreement. We all agree to adhere to this. You can change it and update it. But I would be willing to bet that if I took 5 of you out of this population of people on the call and we set up a team, we just started to work, I bet all 5 of us would have a slightly different, in some cases, significantly different view about how the team should function. We just assume that teams function a certain way, but yet, given the nature of the work and the contingent nature of how teams function, it can be very, very, I would argue, it's very, very useful to sit down and actually focus on this. So it's critically important that you set up, even if a little bit of time, the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I highly encourage you, and if you haven't done it so far on a team you're on, take a few minutes to create it and share it as part of a team meeting, just to make some of these things explicit and to sort of, I'll say, do a better job operationalizing what you're actually working on. Again, I have seen this in practice many times, or I should say the absence of it. And in these kinds of, it's not really the document that's so important. It's the discussion and the agreement that matters the most. So I would highly encourage you to go think about that. Most people have heard of the form, storm, norm, perform. It's now been updated by Bruce Tuckman, the adjourn aspect of a team. So why do I present this if this is such an old kind of model, which it is? Because if you're on a team or you are a team leader in particular, these phases, if you will, are not necessarily individually, or I would say in and of themselves, evolutionary. And what I mean by that is the leader has a job of, and with the team's participation, of moving through these phases. So people will say like, oh, we're in the form forming phase, we're in the storming phase. What I'm advocating is that you, as a team leader, or even as a team member, understand that you have to guide the team through these processes. They don't happen, quote unquote, naturally. A team will not necessarily evolve into high performance just because the model goes sequentially from one phase to another doesn't mean that the team will get there. Think about the teams you've been on. Have you ever been on a team that's been stuck in the storming phase? Have you ever had a team that's got into the norming phase, but the norms aren't necessarily productive, or some of them are maybe counterproductive? Have you ever been on a team that never really got to the performance phase, or the team just kind of limped along and never stopped when if it was, I would say, a project-based team, never took the time to determine how effective the team was and if we actually got to the deliverables we wanted to get to. So the point at the bottom is really critical here. It's not showing you the model that's been around since 1965. It's helping you understand that if you're on the team, or if you're a team leader in particular, your job is to move the team through each of the phases deliberately and thoughtfully, and to move toward that high productivity. I would argue many teams don't actually ask themselves, hey, where are we in this particular evolution? And have we gotten to the point where we can consider ourselves a high-performing team? And I think that's really, really important, is that teams understand that this doesn't just exist, but there's a set of flows and activities the team can work towards to actually get to the point where they are high-performing. And again, I think it's well taken. You should keep this in mind. Not all teams get there. So what helps us get there? Well, and it goes back to the point that was asked about, was the same thing about vision and purpose. Certainly a vision is where the team's going. You may meld that together with purpose. But teams need to have clarity around what it is we're trying to accomplish. Why do we have this team? It answers that Simon Sinek question, start with why. What is the purpose of this team? What is it we are trying to accomplish? Why is the team, or a team, the best way to go about doing this? That's an essential set of questions to address. Certainly, you could put it in your team charter, but to have clarity around. If you're on a team and you don't have a clear purpose, it's going to be tough to be successful, because there's no set of criteria that you can create from the overarching purpose that's going to help you understand whether or not you're meeting what your goals are, and whether or not you're meeting them. So from a good purpose comes a clear set of goals. They should be compelling. They should be time-bound. You should have a sense of what success looks like or doesn't look like. You should know when you have achieved the goals on your team. So I use the trip sometimes with my colleagues, the analogy sometimes with my colleagues of going on a trip. You would never just get in the car with everyone in your family, start driving, and say, we're going to take a vacation, right? I hope you don't do that. That would be pretty frustrating, especially at a lot of kids. But you'd want to say, okay, where are we going? We're going to Florida. We're going to drive to Florida. And my personal point of view is, if you live on the East Coast, especially, you should drive to Florida, to Disney once in your life if you have kids, so you can all experience the misery that goes along with that. I'm on a sidebar. But the idea here is you want to understand where you're going, so that you can construct a set of subordinate goals and activities and milestones to get you there, right? You want to be as clear as possible, as opposed to just getting in the car and driving, which sometimes teams end up doing, because unfortunately they haven't taken the time to understand what's the team's purpose, and do we have a compelling, clear set of goals to get there. So again, these are things you can apply retrospectively. You can look at the teams you're on now and say, let me do a quick synopsis and analysis. What's our purpose? Is that clear? Do we have a clear set of goals? Do we know what success is going to look like when we get there? I think that's really, really important to think about. So commitment, and we'll talk about the 5 dysfunctions here in a second. But you have to have a group of people that are committed. And again, I'll go back to asking you, we're in that direction phase now. Think about a team that you're on that was really high performing. My sense is you probably had an incredible commitment to one another. I don't want to let my team members down. I want to make sure that if I'm on a team, I don't enable or do something that would cause my team members to not perform to their highest level. That's what commitment looks like. To generate that kind of commitment, I'm going to give you a tool here some of you have probably seen. You want to understand each team member and his or her unique dimensions and background and how they fit in. I've got a couple of things in there, River of Life, and there's another tool called a cultural mosaic that can help. I'm going to talk about the first one. Take the time to acknowledge success. Failures happen, have a learning mindset so you can find out what caused that, what can we do differently. Share credit if you're a team leader. That's some common sense there. I think this part is really important, investing time in individual team member development. And to take a step back, and it goes towards what we discussed, I think, in our last session on talent development. If you are a team leader, you probably have people that work with you that may not necessarily be in your functional area or your geography, or you're the same area where you work as part of your organization, especially if you're on a project type team. So development happens on teams in many cases, and it may not be where you typically, quote unquote, report in your organization. So it means we have a higher level of responsibility as a team leader to ensure that we're investing time developing people that may not necessarily or oftentimes work for us directly. But if you are the kind of team leader that has a developmental mindset and is willing to invest in individuals, you'll find that your team not only engenders a great deal of commitment, they tend to want to work with you, then they tend to perform better and get better outcomes. And ultimately, you want to create a positive environment on your team. That can be a challenge to do over time, especially if you're under stress. But that's one of the challenges that you want to rise to the occasion on if you're a team leader, is really engendering that commitment. It is one of the aspects of the dysfunctions of teams. Now, this is a tool I'm going to give you very quickly. I do this and my colleagues do this, and there's different dimensions of it. It's called River of Life. There's one gentleman or colleague I work with, Nick Craig, has a book on authentic leadership. True Northfield Guide is what it's called. On the Path of Life. Some of you have probably seen this. What you do when you're forming a team typically is you give everyone a large sheet of paper. You can do it from a flip chart or something else. Because I couldn't replicate that here online, so it's in PowerPoint. And you give them about 15 or 20 or 25 minutes and some magic markers, and you say, draw a river of your life with the most important, influential things that happen to you or experiences you've had in your life on this river. And you don't need to give people a lot. Where did you come from? Where are you going? What's your source of energy? What are the things that have been obstacles you've overcome? Things like that. And then you give people a chance to write it out. And then the most important thing is when they're done is let them share with one another. And I have almost found to every time I've done this with executive leaders or teams that I'm working with, that people learn things about one another that they've never heard before, even in some cases with people they've worked for 10, 15, 20 years, which I'm always stunned at. So this is mine, I'm going to go through it very quickly. I was going to go through it. I was born in Glen Cove, New York. When I was very young, I moved to Boston against my will at 6 months old. I grew up on Cape Cod. I loved to sail. I started cooking when I was very young. I cook all the time. I went to BU. The influential thing that happened to me was I was a resident assistant. I was a senior resident assistant. It was a very influential thing that happened in my life. I joined the Marines. I went on active duty in California. I went to Saudi Arabia, the Western Pacific. I got married. I worked at Deloitte, not in that order. I really got into teaching CPA review courses, which I actually really enjoyed. I went to Georgetown for my MBA. I have 4 kids. I wrote my first book back in 2011 with a colleague from where I was doing my graduate work, Cranfield School of Management. Went back on active duty in the Marines, got off and started teaching at Boston College and Babson College. I worked at Duke. My second wife is German, so I inherited a German wife and 2 lovely German girls. I have kids in college now, so I don't have any money. That's why I'm still working. I've published the second book, which with Laura's, as I mentioned, is our anniversary today. As a hobby, I like to go to school. I can't seem to get out of school. So I'm getting my master's in theology at Notre Dame. I have 2 cats, a large one and a small one, and now I'm teaching at Brown. So that's a pretty quick run through of mine. But the point of doing that is not to really tell you about me, but just to give you an illustration of what a river of life looks like. If you're doing this for real, thank you. I appreciate that. If you're doing this for real, you put people in groups and you would be amazed at things that they would share about one another. I have seen a lot of tears. I've seen a lot of hugs. It's a great way to get people to connect on a more personal level. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it's usually a great investment. So around the area of commitment, it's easy to do. So I would encourage you to do that. Even on teams that you're on, if you haven't done a team building activity in a while, that's a good one to do. So you have to, as a team leader, getting back to some of the mechanics, you have to really make sure you're monitoring your team's performance, especially if you're going to move them through the areas of the Tuckman model. You have to have project milestones, or at least operational activities you're working on. If you're using a budget, you've got to have metrics that you track. You want to make sure the slides we can send to you, Candida, it's not a problem. The deliverable quality, are we meeting expectations in addition to milestones? Are our customers satisfied? Not a small consideration or evaluation point. How's the team's morale? How are we feeling? Are we happy to be on this team? Are there things that we can do to make the team better? Most people can. How likely are you to promote this team or work to someone else in the organization? So these are things that we know. I can't imagine anyone on this call is going, wow, these are really insightful, Professor Barrows. I'm so grateful. They shouldn't be. Doing them is another matter altogether. And setting aside the time to do these if you're a team leader, or encourage your team leader to do it if you're on the team, is very important. So moving on to think about the last bits of the team around your responsibilities. Now I'm speaking to you as a team leader. You're going to spend most of your time in what I'll call team dynamics, which is managing all the visible and, I'll say, unseen aspects of your team's performance. You have a responsibility, and we know this going back to Amy Edmondson's work. We need to foster a sense of trust and safety. It's the bottom of the Lencioni 5 dysfunctions pyramid, and we know that safety matters when we think about Amy Edmondson's work. So we have to create an environment where people feel like they're not just part of something, they can trust their colleagues. So the river of life, or the path of life, is a tool to help create that, or start that process of creating trust and safety. Building dyadic relationships. A dyadic relationship, you probably know, is just sort of a relationship between two people. You might say, well, why is that important, or important if I'm on a team? Because it's not two people, it's a lot of people. Right, but a team leader, he or she should get to know each person on their team individually, because a team is comprised of individuals and they perform at different levels. They have different needs at different points in time and different capabilities. You need to know those as a team leader, or you're not going to be able to get the best out of your team, and you're not going to be able to develop people on your team like we talked about. Conflict is an aspect of effective teams. And let me say that again. Conflict is an aspect of effective teams. Not toxic conflict that is critical of individuals or who they are as people or someone's character, that is critical respectfully of ideas and willing to suggest different points of view. And going back to the simulation that we had yesterday here at Brown for our master's students, we had a couple of teams that did a really good job of setting up an environment where they had productive, meaningful, challenging conversations, the end of which they didn't all necessarily agree, but they had had enough discussion. So when the leader made the decision, there was some comfort that they could execute. But for those of you that may be disinclined to have conflict, conflict is important as long as it's productive conflict. And teams that have effective and productive conflict tend to perform better. You want to hold effective meetings that are efficient and get things done on time. My guess is everybody on this call, myself included, could run better meetings. Most meetings are poorly run, and it's not just because there's no agenda. I mean, that can be a feature as well, but because we don't have the discipline of, holding ourselves to a timeline, understanding roles and responsibilities. Typically, topics that should be discussed offline spill into meetings if you don't have enough meetings, things like that. So thinking through your meeting structure and how you run your meetings can be really effective. Again, if you're a team leader and you have people on your team, you need to be providing them feedback and coaching. Another thing we talked about yesterday is how to give effective feedback, how to give clear, crisp, constructive, and supportive types of feedback. It's important if you want to develop people. People want feedback. The research shows that people want feedback. Unfortunately, managers tend to be disinclined to give it because they want to be liked, or they don't want to hurt someone's feelings, or it's just awkward. But you have to get accustomed to giving feedback, and there's structures like SBI, I think we've talked about in the past, or the CAR methodology that enable you to give effective feedback. And then having after action reviews, as you're going along, what's working well. If you've delivered something to a milestone, taking a few minutes out of your team's time and going through the traditional after action format, what was supposed to happen, what happened, what did we learn, how are we going to do things differently? All these things we know, many of these things we don't do. So your team, if you're a team leader, or if you're an advisor to a team leader, make sure you're thinking about how to influence and implement some of these things, because they will make a difference back to managing your team dynamics. Now, I created this model a couple of years ago with a colleague. It's CAR, context, action, and response. It's from the Center for Creative Leadership. If you Google it, you'll find it. So I want to take a step back, and we'll go from right to left. Your job, if you're on a team, in particular, if a team leader, and team leaders, I'm really talking to you, is to get results. And I say this about leadership, and I'll say this about leaders on teams. The reason you have a team is to get results. The reason you're a leader in an organization, manager, is to get results. At the end of the day, that's why you're getting paid. We do that in different ways that certainly attend to people's individual needs and collective group needs. But the idea is we have to get results. In order to get results, we understand that there's a certain level of team performance we need to get to, back to that Tuckman model. We want to try to drive our team or help engage our team to the point where they are effective as a team. The team's performing well. That is all happening within this culture and context that is unique to your organization. So you understand. I could never understand that. I'd have to work where you work for quite a while to understand that. But you understand, what's, acceptable and unacceptable, and the challenges that you face and the benefits that you have in your context and culture. But as a team leader in that yellow box, you attend to, I would say, four different variables. One is the sort of structure of your team. So that goes back to who you bring on your team and how you organize your team. Like, how do you sort of staff your team with the right skills and capabilities and get them to work together? Relationships matter at the bottom, back to dyadic relationships. You manage the relationship individually and collectively as a group on your team. You have to give your team clear direction, back to purpose. Where are we going? What are we doing? What are the goals? What does success look like? And then you have to govern your teams through activities like meetings and feedback. So it's not sophisticated, this model, but in order to get results and to drive your team through the team process, I would say the team evolution that we talked about, you really have to attend to these aspects, understand what you're going to produce results-wise, understand what higher performance looks like, and then drive the variables that you're responsible for as the team leader, structure, building relationships, making sure you give clarity around direction, and having good governance in place to get you there. So these are the dynamics that you manage in an ongoing way. And if any of these start to kind of, I would say, deteriorate or become suboptimal, your job is to try to bring them to the point where they are. And you can always ask your team, are we missing something structurally? Should we organize differently? How do we make sure we build stronger relationships? Is it clear where we're going? What's our meeting cadence look like, and are our meetings effective? Going back to one of the books I mentioned at the outset around sort of scaling organizations, there's plenty of information in there if you want to do a deeper dive. So to kind of bring it home, your job again as a team leader is to really create that trust, safe, relationship-oriented environment. We know today from being on teams for so many decades that it's really, really important to do that. You have to be interested in people if you're going to be a good team leader. Have to get to know people personally at some level. We live in a world where there's greater levels of transparency than ever before. It's not suggesting you have to bare your soul to the people you work with on your teams, but you need to be more of a people-focused manager if you want to get the best out of your talent. You want to make sure everyone gets a voice. And I remember from the chat that I saw at the outset, people said, oh, when I was on a great team, or I saw someone who was a great team builder, they were a great listener. They were empathetic. It's true. We want to be someone, if we're a team leader, that gives space for everyone to voice their opinions and hears them in a productive way. You want to be mindful of other people's feelings, right? On a team, probably more now than ever, that people come from very different places, very different backgrounds. Everyone has a very different set of lived experiences. It's important to be culturally sensitive and aware of that, because that's the kind of thing that creates the environment where I feel like I can share things on my team because I won't be judged in a certain way, or it's okay to have a divergent point of view. I've got enough trust and relationships built so that I can ensure that we have that as a team. And then if someone passes you confidential information, provided you can keep it, there's nothing illegal or inappropriate or a policy violation oriented around it. Keep someone's confidence is in fact confidential. That's, as a team leader, you have an obligation for that. So the last thing we'll talk about is here around effective meetings. Oftentimes, meetings are the forums in which teams collectively function, whether we like it or not. So we have to be really thoughtful about running effective meetings. Why do we have a meeting? Why do we have different types of meetings? Strategy meetings, operational review meetings, project meetings, information sharing meetings, like a weekly update type meeting. What I find oftentimes in practice is that managers aren't very clear about parsing out the different reasons and the different purposes and behaviors in different meetings. If you've ever been in a situation where you didn't have clear meeting cadence, you'll find that things start spilling into meetings. We had an agenda, but we went way over. We never got off of the first agenda item. These are typically symptoms of unproductive or lack of clarity around your meeting cadence and how your meetings are going to run and function. So you have to ask yourself, it sounds like almost, I would say, highly perfunctory activity that would be almost unnecessary, is analyzing the meetings that you have. I know that sounds silly, but if you're not clear on what the purpose of the meetings are that you're holding, the frequency, what you'll bring into the meeting, who plays what roles in the meetings, what you'll discuss and won't discuss, how we interact back to our operating agreements, and how we'll end the meeting and have action items, you will have unproductive meetings, and worse, you'll have an unproductive team. People want to know the cadence, and I think that word is actually quite useful. How do we have a cadence that enables us to work effectively? So when I come into a certain meeting, I know how it's going to function. I know who's going to play what role. I know how it's going to happen. Certainly, having spent time in the military, and there are other organizations who do this well. It was very easy to understand how meetings worked, how long they lasted, who did what at what time. But I would say if you're struggling in meetings, this is usually a very low-hanging fruit to fix. It takes some work, but attending to meeting cadence is an important way to do it. And then managing any dysfunctions. The 5 dysfunctions is still relevant. I did a survey with a group recently. It's still very valuable. If you haven't read the book, I'd encourage you to take a look at it. It's easy read. It takes just a few hours. If you're not clear on purpose, if you're not clear, these are not from 5 dysfunctions. Some of them are. If there's too much conflict, or you don't have people with the right skills, or they're not, they got way too much work, or they're not committed, if they're not focused on results, you will end up with dysfunctional individual behaviors, and collectively you'll have trouble on your team. So be mindful of managing dysfunction if you're a team leader. And then the last thing, just to kind of wrap up here, is these action steps. I'll turn it back over to Alice and have some questions. Take a look and take stock of your team's effectiveness. Okay, ask yourself, for the teams you're on, how effective are they? One way you can do that is not just by looking yourself and looking at your charter and your goals and how you're accomplishing them, is ask people, how are we doing? On a scale of 1 to 10, how effective is this team? 1, we're terrible. 10, we're amazing. People will give you an answer. What do we need to do to go from 6 to 9 or 10? They'll tell you. And then once you know that, start to refine your team process. Clarify what it is you're doing in terms of your purpose. Be clear on your goals. Improve your team processes, your meeting cadence when you can. Thank you for that. You can see we have some other sessions coming up, but I want to toss it back over to Allison so we can sort of wrap up and do our polls.
Thank you so much, Ed. This was great. I learned a lot, as I always do, and I can tell everyone else did too. So we have a couple questions for you first to help us shape the future of our portfolio, and then we will move on to a couple of your questions. So if you have a question, please click on the bottom bar of Zoom, click on Q&A, and type and submit your questions now. And as you are submitting those, I am going to go ahead and launch this poll. So there are a couple of different ideas we have for creating a new course on AI and leadership. And we would love your feedback on whether you would like to see that from us. So for question 1 is, if we were to offer a course on AI business and leadership, which of the following would you most want to learn as a skill? And the choices are how to adapt your business culture and your teams for AI usage. Number 2 is financial strategy, sustainability, and AI. Number 3 is how do I mitigate my risk through clear governance structure internally. Number 4 is optimizing my business activities with AI. And then the last choice is no, thank you, I'm not interested. The second question is, how likely would you be to enroll in a course at Brown University that is a 6-week-long course, 7 hours of work per week, all online, that covered those skills? And your options are very likely to very unlikely. The third question is, which of the following skills would you most want to learn in a course that's about how to bridge technology and humanity? And your choices are an overview of AI, how to lead a tech-driven workforce, what the legislation and governance practices are for emerging technologies, how to monitor, audit, and create accountability mechanisms for its use, and lastly, how to stay competitive in a tech-driven workforce. And then the last question we have for you is, how likely would you be to enroll in a course, same structure, 6 weeks, 7 hours of work per week, all online, about those topics, for a course that covers those skills? So I'll just leave the polls open and allow you to continue to answer your our questions, while we move on to answering your questions. And we only have time for a few, but the first question that we have is, what should be done when leaders of a department lack self-awareness and enable a toxic culture?
Oh, that's a tough question. That is challenging. It's oftentimes hard to give feedback to leaders who create that environment. I think the first question is, you have to ask yourself, is that leader? I mean, there's a few things to think about. Is the behavior such that it's violating any policies that you have with creating a hostile type of workplace? I mean, I think you have to think of that up front. Usually they don't rise to that level. They're just kind of uncomfortable or irritating or frustrating. So the second question is it likely that leader is going to receive that feedback? If I sit down and say, hey, Allison, or whomever, I want to give you some feedback, you have to ask yourself that question. If it's really challenging, then, you may want to think about trying to provide that feedback in a way that you think will be received, in talking about what you're experiencing or whether team members are experiencing. It's really challenging to do that. I don't know if there's easy ways to give feedback to leaders who create that environment, because they don't oftentimes either don't realize it, or more relatedly, they may not be that interested in whether or not they're doing that. And that can create a real set of challenges. I'd encourage you to talk to people in your organization, like your HR function, if it's gotten to the point where you feel like you need to have some different perspective from someone in the organization.
Thank you. It's really helpful. The next question dovetails really nicely, which is, how do I provide constructive feedback if I am a leader? I found that people are typically not so open to it.
Yeah, so part of your job as a leader is provide feedback. So I think there's at least two dimensions to that. Oftentimes I think leaders, and I'm giving you a point of view, so feel free to have a different point of view. I think leaders sometimes assume people don't want feedback. The research shows that they do. They even can, quote unquote, constructive or negative feedback. People want that. I think leaders sometimes worry that the feedback that they give won't be well received, and that's possible. That is possible. Some people take the feedback well, some people don't. You can't gauge how other people, but you can try to gauge how other people are going to respond, but you can't really manage that. The way to give feedback is to be very succinct. Don't editorialize, put it in a format, whether it's SBI or CAR, that is, here's the situation, here's the behavior, here's the impact, and leave it at that. Try to be dispassionate about it in terms of frustrations or feelings or things like that. For instance, if you're a leader, the idea is really to just give the feedback and let the person sit with it. The last thing I would say is, have you created an environment on your team where there's enough trust where people feel comfortable getting that kind of feedback? I think that's a question you might want to ask first, is because if you don't have good trust and good relationships, you're going to have a harder time giving that candid feedback. On teams where there's high levels of trust, usually you won't see those kinds of issues around giving feedback, because I trust you that you're telling me this as someone who's concerned with my development.
Thank you. This will be our last question, and we've kind of gotten two questions that are similar, so we'll combine these two for the last one, which is, what are your suggestions for leading if you are not in the position of authority? So in one case, the question was asking about it in a flat organization, so there's no hierarchy and someone has to lead. So how do I lead the team and kind of align them? And in another case, it was in a case where the leader is not really stepping up and there's sort of a vacuum. So this person has been stepping up, but they don't have hierarchical authority. So in these two cases where there's no hierarchical authority, how do you lead? How do you ensure the team's success?
Yeah, these are good questions. The basic assumption underlying both of those, and I think a lot of us have that, is someone has to be in a position of authority to lead other people. I can lead you because I'm your boss, et cetera. And by and large, that's the framework many of us have. When you look at leadership as really in a more modern way, it's a process, meaning everyone participates in leadership. So what I'm saying is, you don't have to necessarily be the defined leader to lead. And I even watched that yesterday on the teams that we had here doing the simulation. What I would encourage you to do is use some of the tools here, right? Hey, I'd love to can I ask everybody, can we spend a few minutes in our next meeting or set up a special meeting to just document everyone's point of view on something like a team charter? I think it would be helpful. I mean, you can, if you have enough, I would say, credibility, and your colleagues have confidence in you, they'll say, sure, yeah, let's spend 30 minutes doing that. Hey, if you'd, Allison, I'm going to send you this in advance. Can you maybe fill out your thoughts, and I'll aggregate everybody's. So you can engage in leadership oriented behavior where you're not the quote unquote leader. And that's called leading. You don't have to ask usually for permission to have somebody's thoughts on what they would, if I sent Allison a blank team charter and said, Allison, do you want to give me some thoughts on that? She would fill it out. And I would say, I'm going to compare this or aggregate it with everybody else. So what I'm saying is, you can use the devices we've talked about here as a means to start to engage with this, what I'll call a leadership process, because at the end of the day, someone else can sort of step in, or other people can step in to provide the kind of leadership on an ongoing or even an episodic basis that will help your team improve its performance.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And thank you all for being here today. I know that you're busy, life is busy, and we are really appreciative that you've chosen the Brown School of Professional Studies as your partner for your lifelong career development. And I hope that you will continue to come back for future sessions in this Lessons in Core Leadership series and also for our future programs. So we'd love to see you in our virtual or in-person classroom soon. And big thank you to Ed for your sharing your incredible wisdom and making this such an interactive and rich session. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.